So, we start with the moment when a candidate, well, I call it coming out as having a vocation. Coming out is called, they tell someone that they think they've got a vocation. Perhaps their parish priest, perhaps they approach someone else. And the first stage in this diocese is generally to get them into the fellowship of vocation. The candidate works with the fellowship of vocation, who will always be there as a support network to them, until they know what the shape of their vocation looks like. It might be that they're called to be a worship leader, or they're called to be a good school governor, or something like that, in which case they don't need to get on the big diocesan discernment process. But if they have they think they have a vocation to ordained ministry, whether as a priest or as a distinctive deacon, or to reader ministry, licensed lay ministry, then they get passed to vocations advisors and start working with the vocations advisors. It's been the custom in the diocese that the vocations advisors start working through the criteria and the registration form with them. And we've hit a few problems with that, because basically by the time the candidates get to diocesan and provincial discernment, the registration forms are out of date. And they're actually really bad about updating things. Sometimes it's much easier to write things from the start rather than updating. And I think one of the things that the vocations advisors table is going to have to talk about, and I've already talked to Mark Ansell about this, so I'll feed in what he said to your table, is what the vocations advisors actually do with the candidates while they're preparing them. So that, and part of this process is so that they get used to talking about vocation and talking about the things of God, which is not easy in our society without wanting to look like a holy Joe or an idiot. So, it's getting the language comfortable in their mouths by the time they get to people who are assessing it. When the vocations advisor thinks they're ready to be passed to the DDO, they're passed to the diocesan director of ordinance if they're exploring a call to the ordained ministry. It has been that if they're exploring a call to the licensed ministry, they've been passed to me, because Dewi was a little uncertain about dealing with that. It would be better, I think, if they all went to Lee, but Lee has to agree with that. So again, that's another thing we have to sort out. Before they go to Lee, sorry, I've missed stage 4. There's a confirmatory visit to a second vocations advisor. One of the ways we guard against people's unintentional bias is by making sure that they see a variety of people, different genders, different life experience, different ages, so that they don't always get looked at by the same sort of people, and equally they don't always deal with the same sort of people, because they have to be aware of their unconscious biases as well. DDO works with the candidate until he believes that they're ready to be sent to the diocesan discernment panel. And the diocesan discernment panel is a group of people, usually in the boardroom of Abergwili, sitting around the big boardroom table, and the candidate comes in and they're asked to introduce themselves and given a little talk by the chair, and then they're asked questions by 3 people, one of whom basically looks at how their mind works and how they're wired for mission and evangelism. One of them looks at how they are as people of prayer and how that affects their lives. And one of them looks at how they are with other people, so their pastoral potential. And we always say we're looking for potential, not the finished article. That board is advisory to the bishop, as all these boards are. But basically, if the panel says yes, the bishop, who generally wants to see candidates as well at this stage, says, great, on you go to provincial discernment. If the answer is no, or not this, the candidate gets referred back to the fellowship of vocation, which helps them rethink what their vocation might actually be if it's not licensed lay ministry or ordained ministry, unless the not this is a very small variation, like they've offered for NSML, but we think they'd be much better off as a NSM for various reasons, or they've offered for NSM and we really think they ought to be stipendiary. The answer could be not here. The example I always use of that is if someone really has a call to be a prison chaplain. Well, we don't have only opportunities for prison chaplaincy in this diocese. So then they'd be passed to DDO and DOM, that's me, to start the process of commending the diocese, the candidate to another diocese. Okay, well, you can't do prison chaplaincy here. Decide whether you want to be here or whether you want to do prison chaplaincy. If it's prison chaplaincy, I'm going to have to pass you on to Swansea and Brecon, or I'm going to have to pass you on to a diocese that does that. The answer could well be not yet. And if the candidate is willing, they work with me, they work with Lee to strengthen whatever we thought needed to be strengthened before they could go on to the next stage. It might be that they need a wider experience of the Church in Wales or something like that. Or quite often it's been just too soon since they were baptised, and they need to build up some life experience as a Christian. At that point, a suitable DBS is arranged through the bishop's office, and the DDO books them a place on the provincial discernment panel. The provincial discernment panel does what it does, usually a 3-day conference. Many of us are familiar with them, having been through them, and at that conference, which is over 3 days but is really 2 days long, there's a lot of prayer, there's a lot of interviews, 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, and there are a few group exercises. That's how it is at the moment. So that provincial discernment panel, which is, the anagram is PDP, reports to the bishop, and if the answer is yes, they go on to step 11. If the answer is no, the bishop has a right to overturn the results of a PDP. After all, it's the bishop who makes the ultimate decisions about whether someone's ordained or not, and has to answer to the Spirit of God for that. But if he chooses not to exercise that right, the DDO and the Fellowship of Vocation offer pastoral support and a chance to rethink. If the candidate's going on, the diocese decides the mode and length of training, usually in consultation with St. Paddens. And while they're in training, reports on their conduct and their progress are continually sent to the bishop, and that training is still a way of discernment, and all of that contributes to the bishop's decision whether to ordain or not. We as a diocese have pulled people from training, so it's not a done deal by the end of provincial discernment panel. Just before the ordination, their final checks by the registrar. We really ought to know long before that people need conditional baptism or conditional confirmation because they can't find the paperwork. So I would really not have that happening in a few weeks before the ordination, although it has. And then we get to the actual ordination or licensing. That's the process as it is at the moment. But from September, there's going to be a change. From September this year, Part 1s will be offered. And that changes everything. For a year, until September 2025, people can still get through on the old pattern because we recognise that people have been prepared for the old pattern. But after a year from September, everyone will have had to do a Part 1 before they go to the provincial discernment panel. So, Caroline, would you like to say a little about what the provincial discernment panel is like?
What we want to do at a provincial discernment panel is to get to know the candidate. We've seen all their paperwork. We will have discussed all their paperwork before they get there, because we get there on a Monday afternoon. But we want to see the real person, the authentic person. And then what happens at a panel is the candidates arrive for lunch on Tuesday. We have an introductory session, we have prayer, we then go into a group exercise where people are given a scenario, and then they have to discuss how that scenario would play out and what advice they would give a ministry area leader who had, for instance, been given £2,000 in a legacy, had 12 churches, had this long list of things they could spend the money on. What would they advise the ministry area leader and the ministry area council as to the method about how they could decide what that £2,000 was going to be spent on. We used that scenario a while back, and out of the 12 churches, the candidates decided they were going to close 5 of them. I wasn't entirely sure where that came from. We then go into a series of interviews. They have 4 interviews which last about 45-50 minutes, and they will cover all the 7 qualities. We are using the qualities as of now rather than the criteria, but they are basically the same with a few added bits. That interview is a conversation. It is, we do try to be gentle with people. We also try to be robust. There's no point us being there, being all lovely. We need to actually be robust with them as well to ascertain who they are and where they're coming from, and whether or not we think they should go forward for training for ordination. Because we're not there to say yes, this person should be ordained. We're there to say yes, this person has the potential and should be trained. Then we have a 350-word theological reflection on a psalm, which they deliver on Wednesday in evening prayer, and we have Eucharist and or morning or evening prayer every single day. And then what else do we do? Oh, we do the 10-minute topics, which is where they have a whole list of topics face down on a table, and they have to pick one and then share a conversation about it. So we have retired the "Do the Yeti exist?" question. Sorry guys. Yeah, lots of people knew that. We do have a new one which is should superheroes be made to pay for the damage that their actions cause? We have really serious ones as well. I'll talk more about 10-minute topic a bit later on, because that might be one of the things that we're going to change. We do I was going to say watch, it sounds like we've got, binoculars on them all the time, but we do see how they behave in a social situation as well, because we think that's very important. If somebody sits there being really rude to a member of staff, that's a flag to say, ooh, really? If somebody sits there going, I don't know why I'm here, because I'm obviously really, really good, and then that's another flag that we might actually start to question them about. But all in all, and actually now we don't tell them that they can't come to the pub with us, which used to be the case before. It said, you can't come to the pub with us in the evening. Although I have to say, the rate that pubs are closing in up there in Harden, it's quite difficult to find a pub. Not, of course, as discerners have any time to do anything at all like that, because we're all incredibly busy. So that's it, really. It's about getting to know people, getting to know where they're coming from, getting to know what their journey's been like. We have found, as Rhiannon says, that people are coming to panel too early. It is important, we think, that we spend from Tuesday lunchtime to Thursday lunchtime with them. The Church of England only have one day, but we have that 2 nights with them, because people are really nervous when they come, and sometimes you only see the real person by the Wednesday afternoon, so it's important that we do that as well.